Hello there. Right, it is very nice to see you all again, or talk to you all again, really. So welcome to Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. This one is 7M2 Attack Position. Music by John Williams, orchestrated by Arthur Morton, and my reduction. I must say that Frank's catalogue is superb. This is a very, very quick preview. But what he's done is to, and I'm sure he'll release this soon. I'm sure he won't mind me just doing this. But there's a little bit about each orchestrator, particularly for the originals. So it's well worth having a look at that. And even when it's not redone, just the original version that he's got up there at the moment is superb. Pardon me. So let's make a start. This is a really interesting one because there's a sort of real hint of variation form in this, which is just that, you know, talking about structure and film music is really weird because it's just linear. But there are things that recur. And what's interesting about this is that we've got these sorts of thematic bits of material. It's just an overview, by the way, which reappear. So all of these sort of block chordal things. And then we've got this sort of Shostakovich 10, that sort of idea, and that sort of idea, and then it moves on to a sort of another variation here, which is based upon that one that we just heard. So let's call this 3. So where you've got sort of pedal that, but then the melody note changes at the top. Then we go back to variation 2, and then more variations of this. So again, variation 3, and then I've called this variation 4 because it just builds up, but basically sort of texturally, really. But that keeps going quite a lot. And then there's this big fanfare, which is all based on the same thing. And then we've got Incredulous Imperials, I've called it that, where they're moving to attack position, that sort of thing. That's sort of it, really, because the rest of it is sort of drifting off. They're not quite sure where they are, and then it segues pretty much back to Dagobah, which is very different, obviously. Sort of the music for the last sort of few bars, 74 to the end, really is all Dagobah. And then we've got these really interesting sort of planed chords. So the two that I'm going to be talking about, if you want to get a little bit of ahead of yourself before I get there, is 6Z19. So those are two minor chords, a minor second apart or a major seventh apart. So in this case, B minor and C minor. He has it in various configurations. You can just sort of hear it, really. You know, often that sort of thing. He often uses second inversion on the lower chord. And that really is a bitonal chord, but it's from a Hungarian minor. But he uses that, and then the derivation of that is 522, which is almost minor chords, but it's not quite. By the way, you can get the same thing with major chords as well, which is really interesting. So this more is where you have F sharp, let's say F sharp minor, but in this case, there's no need to put the A in, so he's sort of segmenting that off. And then F major, so it's a minor chord with a major chord semitone apart. So we get this sort of unusual thing. In this case, he has them in second inversion again. And I never knew what that was, but that's all it is. It's a very sort of common, would you believe, polychord that he uses. So just to reiterate that, it's a major chord in the upper extension. which can either be root position, first inversion, or second inversion. In this case, it's first inversion, but often he has it in second version. And then the lower one, because of course the third of the lower one is part of it, shares the same note with the upper extension. So in this case, F sharp minor and F major, they share that. Like that. So that's really interesting as well. And in this case, he's also got that in second inversion as well. I've called it F5, but actually you could kind of think of it as minor. It's just not there. And the reason I haven't called it minor is because it isn't there. Otherwise, he would have put it there. That's two of the sort of big pitch class set things that we've got going on. We've got a little bit of Hungarian minor. A very small amount. This last chord is just bonkers, really. It's a sort of Hungarian major scale, 731 verticalized in the top bit, and then everything else is sort of octatonic. And indeed, most of the cue is octatonic, as we shall see. So let's start at the beginning. So this is about 1 hour, 6 minutes, 2 seconds into the film. And it's the scene where Vader's getting bounty hunters to track the Millennium Falcon. So he's talking to the bounty hunters, no disintegrations, and he points at Boba Fett. So we've got this Boba Fett theme. This is associated with him, and indeed it actually occurs with bounty hunters in general, but it becomes a Boba Fett thing. So interestingly enough, the film cuts 1 bar of the original cue, which is this B flat minor third. So everything is thickened in thirds. So it's quite an interesting texture. Bassoons and contra with double bass trem, which you can barely hear. It's not mezzo piano. It really is pianissimo, to be perfectly frank. And then timp, and there's nothing else. It's quite sparse. And it's quite interesting to think about sparse orchestration, because it actually takes quite a long time to get from there to there, because it's very, very slow. If you think about sort of 56, that's less than 1 every second. So what do you got? 4, 8, 12, 14, 18... 22, 24 seconds until we get to that, which is actually quite a lot in terms of music. So, yeah, I think he'd be sort of, nice to have resources. And they're just 2 repeated phrases. So they're all plain. So, like that. The only thing is that it's all octatonic apart from the F. Because if we're in octatonic 1, so we would normally have an F sharp with all the other notes which are in black. So the F sharp is not there, and it's just an F natural. But apart from that, that's pretty much it's pretty straightforward. Again, with all good thematic material, he tends to put 3 different rhythms in the first phrase. So in this case, we've got half notes and minims. Quarter notes, but tied dotted rhythms as well. So he's already done that. Doesn't happen here, but of course it's a very distinctive rhythmic figure. Very, very hard to do on a keyboard. So this is all A minor. So we started off in B flat minor. Then we have this sort of semitonal shift. And then, but we don't. We have a semitonal shift to A minor. So whether you thought it should go from F major, or let's say F, it goes down a semitone to A minor. That's very much a technique that Bruckner used. You can hear it in Ecce Suggedos Magnus, or Magna, can't quite remember which one it's called, but in so many pieces, he'll go to the semitone below the target note. So if you have, let's say, C major, so instead of going to C major, go to B minor. Like that. It's a really nice sort of Brucknerism, which works quite satisfactorily, I think. So here we are with a little bit of cymbals. We've got timps going on. We got a little bit of filigree, but this time in the violins. There we go. Where we've got the block chordal trumpets. sort of galloping along. So they're sort of going from the keynote, one step down, neighbouring note, back up to a minor third, then repeating, then going to flat 5, then chromatically down in root position triads, and when it gets up there, the wind sort of join as well. So that's piccolo, flutes, oboes, clarinets, E-flat clarinet, and even bass clarinet, would you believe? All an octave lower, obviously. I just haven't put them in for space reasons, really, more than anything else at that point. So then we end up with a 418. Just before we get there, it's worth pointing out that the violins here and violas are pizzicatoing on the accented bits of some of the brass. It's a classic Pitts orchestration that brings out the transience or the attack of the brass. It's very, very common indeed, and here's a good example. We end up on a chord, a typical 418 chord, so in this case it's a minor chord with the sharp 4, with that sharp 4 in the bass. So most people just think it's a random wrong note bass. It's not. It's 418. It's octatonically derived, and it's definitely something that he uses time and time again in that specific voicing as well. So then we've got a slight variation of this galloping idea. This is called the theme attacking a star destroyer. An octave lower on the horns. So it's different here. Whoops. Just missed that one. And it's just imitated. Like that. All sort of block chordal and pretty much octatonic until it gets up to the top. Like that, chromatically descending. So quite straightforward at that point. Then we've got a variation, this now 2, I'm calling this, in the woodwind. Very, very Shostakovich C Symphony number 10. If I play number 10, I'll try and get this up for you. Here we go. So just have a listen to this. So there we go. That sort of idea. So very, very fast, articulated playing, like that. He uses it in so many of his symphonies. I've just picked number 10 just because it was something that I just immediately recalled. But I know it's in 5 and I think also in 15 as well, which is that weird thing with the William Tell overture at the first movement. It's just really very strange. Anyway, but also notice that here he's now using that sort of Maria type idea, sharp 4 to 5. So Hungarian minor, mixed with non-Hungarian minor. So, he's got these sort of literal false relations where he's got a D sharp and a D natural at the same time. That's called a false relation. So then little bits of trombones. By the way, that's probably significant. It's not a sort of short long, it's a long and then da-ba-ba-ba. It's just adding more power in the trombones at that point, and indeed they're just doubling the strings at that point. This is a good example, again, exactly the same technique where we have pizzicato with the accented bits of the horn, so the same thing. And then we've got arco at that point with an A pedal. So now all A minor chord tones until this bit where we're really much more in the mixed mode, that sort of Hungarian minor. So sometimes it's a D sharp, sometimes it's not. In this case it is. But sometimes it's a G natural when it should be a G sharp. So we got these sort of really interesting sort of mixed modes at that point. And then it's just a sort of descending A minor, melodic minor. And then back to the sort of truncated horns that we had before here in bar 11. So they make a little reappearance just for one bar. Again with a sort of slight pizzicato effect, so similar orchestration. And then we've got this very clever spotting here, because Hahn is saying, let's make the jump to hyperspace 1, and it's there, pretty much on that pizzicato. Then 2 is there, where we got a little bit of filigree in the violins, like that, a little run, almost chromatic. It's just, and it's a way of Williams not making it obviously chromatic, just having one major second there, but then everything else is chromatic. And then we end up on this sort of C sharp, just C sharp and G, like that, sort of a real dyad. And then we've got an octatonic. You know, 1, 2, 3, whoop, 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 light speed fails. Sort of wonderful sort of octatonic moment at that point. Then we end up on this sort of D sharp pedal for quite a bit of time, actually, although it's sort of dotted crotchet equals 142 roughly at that point. And then we've got an example of this sort of like treading water idea. So we've got this sort of pedal here, chord. Like that. So most of the notes are octatonic, but some of them aren't. And that E sharp and F is not part of it. And it's just a way of him varying. Let's not always do an octatonic. And sometimes he doesn't go for that. And indeed, he's got a completely contrasting idea in the electronic piano and the harp as well. Like that. Which is all whole tone. So that can be quite interesting. So we just sort of, he just doesn't use all of them. And also notice that the major 7th is the span of what he does. That's an extremely common thing that he also does. That's quite unusual because, but even though it's a sort of Italian 6 type chord, like it wants to go to B flat, but it doesn't have that harmonic function. So really it's not that. It's a separate chord, a sonority, if you will, which is just simply used to fill in the harmony of the outer note. So here we got the pedal and then this sort of little creepy walk down the stairs type pizzicato bass. It's not fair. And Chewy's sort of crying. Then it picks up energy with straight back into that sort of variation 3, this sort of idea. Sort of variation 2, I guess. It's the same sort of thing. It's variation 3 is just variation 2 with slightly different. So at this point, we've got the melody notes like that. But everything else is a pedal. Nothing else changes. Like that. And it's very simple. It's just sort of diatonic, sort of very small melodic outline. But note that there's a bit of a Stravinskyism going on with all of these little, like that, with those sort of grace notes. C writer spring, augurser spring, it's all over Stravinsky. It's just a common thing that he does, ornamenting 9s like that, especially in the wind. In fact, almost exclusively in the wind, actually. Then we've got the usual pizzicato with the transients idea, picking out the melodic notes at the top, and then some filigree at the top, where we got a piccolo 2 added at that point. So yeah, it's interesting the neutrality of the chords at that point. So although the tune, and it's all diatonic really, isn't it? And it does that. I've called it D sus2 because it doesn't really feel as though it's A because of the theme being in D. But it has that sort of really weird mixture of sort of dominant and tonic at the same time. It's really just a strange sort of ambiguous tonality in some ways. So we got sort of quartal secundal stuff. So if you put them in like that, but then it's just sort of diatonic 1, 2, 3, but just in a strange inversion. In this case, a minor 7th span, which is unusual. And then we've got this sort of implied, like an E7 third inversion, but with an A. Sort of like an added 4 or 11th, that sort of idea. And it's just ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Notice the trombones don't do the ba-da-ba. They just stay on that just because it's much easier to play. Otherwise they'll have to change position. So then we've got variation 3 again. Let's put that in red. Again, with all the notes this time picked out on the bassoon quite high. We've actually written it in the treble clef, would you believe? There we go. Then we've got a kind of shift at this point. So we've got sort of, you know, like a sort of dominant of DM, of D minor. And then it changes, which is a D pedal, but with E flat and B flat as a dyad as well, which is really weird. Where we've also got the top notes of the melody. Now, if you have a look at the oboe line, and it becomes a bit more octatonic. So I'll point those out with all of those. So those red notes are just the melody notes against the backdrop of that sort of chord here. Don't really know what to call it other than it's D with it's that. Just those notes, and then sort of D, F sharp, octatonic. So that's where I'm thinking at that point. If I play it on the piano. So yeah, and it feels octatonic at that point as well, because of the like that, and indeed we get a bit of a transition, and in fact, you know, the alpha chord is part of that octatonic, octatonic T2 as well. So we got that sort of E flat minor but with a G like that. So I've called it the alpha chord, which is what it is, 417. And then I've got sort of interesting things here because it's quite difficult to explain. So we still got the da 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 da. So it's still part of the variation, but this time it's sort of with that G pedal. Then it comes off like that to the sort of heroic rebel, like, but not quite. It should be E flat major if it was rebel. So it's more sort of anticipation, maybe. Let's write that in. Yeah, I think it's more anticipation than rebel, because rebel would be major. So what's going on here? So we got this sort of 3-note chord. So I've called it sort of G major 7, but without the third. There's so many different ways of describing it, but basically tense, less tense, because there's we feel that sort of Italian 6 wants to go there. So I put less tense, more tonally voice leading-y, less tense as well, because it's a sort of uncommon chord that should go to there, but at the moment it goes here to G minor with a B flat, so just first inversion, then back, but now more tense, more tonally voice leading-y, then it less tense because it resolved, and then of course with everything else, because it goes pretty quickly, it makes a nice sort of little continuity like that, obviously with the target note being that E flat minor, like that, with lots of flats, with a bit of filigree over the top And then we've got this, let's call it Incredulous Imperials. And what I mean by that is this little figure. Like that. And then we've got this sort of... and it's a really, really fun... it's a really fun harmonic progression at that point. So we've got G to a C half dim, and then D flat with a C flat, then E unison, and then 4/18, so sort of E flat sharp 4 with an A in the bass. I haven't called it sharp 4 because there isn't one in the in there, but actually it kind of is. Let's put it in anyway. Then you know, sort of almost planing, but not quite, because the resulting chord is different each time. So in this case, half dim, this case third inversion dominant, and then in this case it's a sort of 4/18, so wrong note bass chord, but in fact it's just E flat with an A, sharp 4 in the bass. Then we're into F sharp, like that, with a little bits of sort of block chordal triads at that point. So we're getting a D minor over a C sharp, so that's a minor chord with a sharp 7, but in this case in the bass, and it keeps repeating. Quite a surprising sort of little bit of trumpet at the end, sort of F minor to D flat, and it's a real jump, and then E as well. So they're all sort of related by thirds, sort of, just different ones. So we got D up third to F, then down a third to D flat, or C sharp, don't forget, and then E. So they're all sort of related by thirds. So that's a nice sort of tertial progression, or tertiary. Let's call it tertial progression. There we go. Tertial progression. D to F to D flat, C sharp to E. So there's a little N harmonic moment which converts that D flat to C sharp, then going up another third, minor third to E as well. Mostly minor thirds, major third, minor third. And then we've got this lovely little chord here, which is the one I was talking about at the beginning. So a 6Z19, a pair of minor triads and minor second apart. So at the top we've got E minor in root position, on the bass we've got F minor in second inversion, like that. I haven't put the second inversion just so I didn't want to confuse even further. Then we got the basses joining. So it's firmly a sort of F at that point. So then it could be argued that it's one of them. So if we called it that, it is that. So that's crazy. That's just not it, is it? Because it's F minor in the bass. So A flat major 7 sharp 9 sharp 4. It's sort of hilarious how sometimes it can... That's just doing that. No. There we go. F minor with a major 9 and a sharp 11. But it isn't. It's a bitonal chord, really. I suppose you could think of it like that, but it's not really. It's not meant to be played, these chord symbols. They're just analytical symbols, really. So here we go. And then another one. So D minor with E flat minor. And then this time it's slightly different, where we have F major but with a minor chord, like that. So it's very, very similar. This time it's one minor chord and one major chord a minor second apart. So this time the top extension is now a major chord, like that, but it's the same sort of, like that. So you could swap them over. he tends to not do that because it's important for him to have the major 7th at that point, not a minor 9th. Then we got really sort of common 3/5, which is just that. Sorry, above F, like that, above F pedal. So that should really be like that, above F. And that leads on to G. Wow. Like that. So sometimes he just sort of suddenly puts these other chords in. But don't forget that G has acted sort of as a pivot note. Obviously not a pivot chord, but a pivot note. Where it's now the timpani, sort of bum, dee, digga, da, dum, sort of imperial drum at that point, which then goes to another sort of half dim chord, like that, and then we got an actual octatonic scale, and then it goes into the cuts to the Dagobah bit. So now we're in a sort of completely different territory. Where we got this sort of lovely sort of celeste and little flutes, you know, with Yoda's theme sort of embedded in there. Notice the tremolo strings this time with very low flutes, but that's okay because you can hear them because everything else is extremely low. So the strings just support that, and nice blended orchestration at that point because lots of different things. So that picking out that, and the, you know, piano picking out the sort of celeste above, or the harp rather, and then the glockenspiel with all sorts of different things going on there. So then we've got another 6Z19. In this case, it's all root position chords and literally next to each other, like that, which go up an octave. Where we got that little typical high piccolo as Luke lists the stones one by one, and then these little solo clarinet bits, solo bassoon, another solo flute at the end. And we got this sort of really weird chromatic descent, so a strange sort of almost atonal bit, but basically if you follow the strings, it's basically chromatic, and then it ends up on a C sharp pedal, one that's you're not necessarily expecting. Dee dum bum, we're kind of expecting a D sharp, but it never actually gets there. He actually goes to a C sharp. So another way of you know, Williams not going to the what you might think is the normal resolution for something. So he deliberately stops it, which I think is a good thing. So to these planed chords then, 4Z19, I'll just call them. So we've got a sort of major second at the top, and then we got a little sort of quartal dyad, and then the same thing. Then we've got a slightly different thing there, so very tense, and then 418 all the way back to the end. So we got a sort of quartal dyad, then a minor third. A note that at least we do have an enharmonic sort of pivot note at that point. So he does kind of get there. Then we got that little flute moment. And then a similar thing here to here, where this is the 522, which we just had actually a little bit earlier. So at this point, so major chord with a minor chord a semitone apart. So in this case, as I said before, we've got major chord with a minor chord. I'm not counting the A because it's not there, but if we just concentrate on these two lines here, this is how it goes. So F with F sharp goes down chromatically, and then it ends up being a sort of you know, octatonic chord. That's the sort of Petrushka idea, but there's all sorts of other things going on. So in here, the woodwind, we've got the most extraordinary chord. So whilst you've already got this going on, we've also got a sort of Hungarian major scale, like that in the upper wind. But at the same time, we've also got this weird stuff as well. So 8/27, so almost octatonic, but not quite. That's the note that's not quite octatonic. Because we want that a D sharp, but it's not like that. So very, very similar. And there's no reason why I shouldn't have the D sharp, because I'm pretty sure it's elsewhere. Yeah, there. So I'm not quite sure why that occurred. Maybe he just wants to sort of mess with us a little bit. But he does tend to do that. So sort of mixing octatonicism with something that is not octatonic is a way that he keeps things alive. And then we just got a little 4-note chromatic cell, which goes minor second, and then to minor third, and then it ends on E. So sort of tonally wise, it's a bit strange because it sort of keeps shifting to unexpected areas. But it's very much a cue of 2 parts, isn't it? You know, this whole sort of section here from to the end. So that's what however many bars that is, probably about 20 or so, 21 bars. And then the rest of it, 50 bars, is the attack position. So a really interesting little cue, lots in there. Variation technique seems to be something that he uses in this particular one. And it's very modular as well, because we've got little chunks of music. So we could divide them. That's chunk 1, and separate completely. That's the Bounty Hunters. This is chunk 2. That's chunk 3, but based on chunk 2. Chunk 4 is based upon chunk 3, and that goes that. Then we got 1 bar of what we had before. Then a separate bar which is not related to anything, because it's sort of a surprise thing of 1, 2, 3, which this is all part of. Then a pedal. Then we've got another chunk really of material at this point. It's very linear. It's very dramatically written. It's all to do with the film. Then we go back to the variation bit where they kind of try and figure out what to do. And another chunk here. Then another chunk here. It's quite, you can really see it in blocks, can't you? You know, that is a definite chunk, all of that bit here. And then another chunk at this point. So it might be something to think about, little 4 bars of different things, 5 bars of things, 6 bars of things. So all of that, which kind of concludes that bit of the cue. And then they're all sort of floating in space. You know, this becomes a chunk in itself because of the texture. There's nothing else coming in there. Then another little separate sort of 4-bar segmentation, which then goes on to Dagobah. That's a little bit more through composed, but we still got a double bar line, don't forget. So there's one sort of particular type of texture, lifting stones. And then the last one is this little bit of piccolo solo, then chromatic descent, more chromatic descent, surprise chord at the end, and then a chunk of things right at the end. So it's a really interesting cue to think about modular composition, not just action cues, but anything. Just because you're describing what's going on screen, you have to. There's no time to develop stuff, which is often a criticism of Williams's thematic music, because until you get to the concert version or the credit sequences, he doesn't really develop things in the same way that a classical composer might, because there's just no time to do that. It's just not something you can do. And he's admitted it. He said, well, I can't. And you're not supposed to either. So a really interesting one. And I hope you've enjoyed it. And I will see you next time. So next time is Yoda raises the ship. Then we've got Vader's command. City in the Clouds, Lando's Palace, Luke to the rescue, Vader shows up, putting 3PO together. So I've done all these ones in full score. Then we got Trouble in Prison, Carbon Freeze, which is an amazing thing, little insert that Angela Morley did. Luke pursues the captives, then Chewie chokes Lando through the window, losing a hand to hyperspace finale, end credits. It's crazy. It's sort of not that far away from the end of the film. I feel as I've only just started it. It doesn't seem like Phantom Menace, I think, took so long because of all the cuts to the film. It was just a nightmare putting it together, but this one's a little bit easier. I think I should be turning to Jedi after this one, which is really fascinating. And then, of course, A New Hope as well, which I'm really looking forward to, because it sort of, it sets everything up. It'd be nice to sort of go back to it in some ways. And then I think I might do some Harry Potter and Jerry Goldsmith and James Horner and various other people as well. Lord of the Rings, maybe. So thanks for watching.